Dang the Tempanya, she said, Lu, Sem, and Chowa, Sem Chu, she let me near, and Rangatsini, Tambo Rangatsini, the Ingwesson. Then Delia Tempe Tsin, then and the dead to Chitsini, and the Sheraki Javache, and the Gomiadi, and the gay, or that the Ganlia Shustavache, that in Ma, that the Tempanya Comna de la. Tomorrow, come now, tomorrow, my ember comes to Session you was that tomorrow comes to the Yashu.
As you've looked at in the preceding 8 classes, the meditation of the close placement of mindfulness is done on one of 4 objects, that of the body, that of feelings, that of mind, and that of phenomena. And then, after looking at the observed objects, we came to look at the way to perform this meditation. And we saw that the way that is common or shared is to meditate first on the specific characteristic of the observed object, coming to know its entity, and thereafter to investigate its general characteristics. And that this meditation is done with mindfulness and wisdom. So that is the first of the 2 ways to perform the meditation, the common or shared way, and we've now looked at that. So we come to the second, the uncommon or the unique way to engage in this meditation.
That tomorrow my inbox comes to Labdu, then Yando da Ranjanam di Ganscans Gongore, said that Janjusimbanam ye and Mixia Ganscongore said. That tomorrow, corners of Sosarangi come Naroji, all those Geneshe, that tomorrow come Nasi, come to the Sigurada.
The uncommon or the unshared way to perform this meditation is called such because the hearers in solitary realizes the 2 types of Tibetan practitioners meditate in one way, and bodhisattvas meditate in a different way. So therefore, they each have their own unique way of engaging in their meditation. Hence, the second way to perform this meditation is unshared or uncommon.
I didn't Sheba Nibala, Sigua Nibala, said that tomorrow my inbox not the share, Niba said, the Shebala Nagas Mipadam, Ila Jebatan, Toba Sumle, Sigduata.
It's in our book, we're on page 4. And it says number 2, there are 3 unique or uncommon ways to meditate on the 4 close placements of mindfulness. Firstly, the observed object. Secondly, mental engagement. And thirdly, attainment.
She did that Jiba Miba Jiba Chagori. In that Miba Ladu, Miba Karakeba Yorse, Yanamji, and Lu Jamanaja come to Lu Kawali Migo, said. Janus Madamji, Lu Jamanaja to Lu Karali Migo, and still Migo, said, this is the Miba or Miba or. The Yila Jeba said, and then Yila Jeba said, indeed, in the Comia de la Canis Comgo Ila Jade, and do Catisca and do that, just Banam, Yendenam, Yendeda Ranja, the you to Comio, the Ila Chedu, Ila Cheba Caniscigore, Janus Madam Caniscigore, Sada. Then Yendu down Topa City, Yendu down and Yendugi, the Ranja, Digi, and the Jamanaja come to do, Miu Garotobich to Comgores, and then Janus Madam Gi. And no Gomiadi, Miu got a topic to Congo, said the Tobas is a topic, the Mibi Cavaliore, Ilach is a Cavaliore, and the topic Cavaliore, that Sum said Miba, the Ilach about Tobas as disorder.
The second way to meditate on the 4 close placements is not shared between the 3 types of beings. So the 2 types of the hero and solitary realizer, the Tibetan practitioners, and the Mahayanas, the bodhisattvas, they meditate in differing ways. So if we looked first at observed object, so the observed object we heard about in the first outline, and that there are four, namely those of body, of feelings, mind, and of phenomena. Same four observed objects are referred to here, but within that, the hearers and solitary realizers have their way of engaging in meditation on those four objects, and the bodhisattva has their own way of engaging in meditation on the observed objects. So the objects are the same, the way they engage in the meditation differs. And secondly, mental engagement. Here, the hearer and solitary realizers on the one hand, and the bodhisattva on the other hand, have a differing way of engaging in in terms of their mental engagement in the meditation. And then thirdly, their objective, the attainment they're striving for. The hearers and solitary realizers have a particular objective they're striving to attain, and the bodhisattva has their own objective they're striving to achieve.
다 당보 예제에서 다 미빠들 시고 미빠를 개발 가려서는 요래서 다 개발 가려서는 다 년뒤에디기 년뒤에다 란제 남기 류전반여자 류라미네 랑지 친이이네 다네 공묘도 미에디 류라미고와 다 류가는 미고래 람나 류 망보여 랑기 류 샹기 류 아니지 류 망보여와 제가 류가는 미고래 랍도 다 아주 그지 다데 녀래 류들라 류들라 치 류다 난기 류다 지난이 류 망보 셰서 숨 셰서 디나신다 다 냐나 남지 랑기 류 코나를 미기래서도 다 류세 류담만이자 공묘도 년되다 랑제되기 류니 담만이자 공도 류디 랑기 류 코나를 미고 랑기 류를 미제 아니 디디도 랑기 류디 랑기 류를 미 제가 랑기 류디다 뭐 간다시 요래서네 되네 가서 제바체제 랑기 류기 생이를 제바체 되네 랑기 류텔이야 아니 그 지생이 미다바다 다음에 봐도 동화세 아니 가사 강사 다음에 봐 어디네 제바체도 공고를 봐 되네자 년나남 류를 미네 류자만여자 공미도 류가는 지금 미고래 랍도 간제 년나디 류디 미버서에도 랑기 류 코나고서 랑기 류 코나를 미고를 마도 셴기 류를 미고 말해서 되다.
The observed object for the hearers and solitary realizers are the four we heard previously: bodies, feelings, mind, and phenomena. And within that, we've already covered the subdivisions. So, for example, for the body, we saw previously that there's the outer body, the inner body, and the body that is both outer and inner. So when the hearer and solitary realizer approaches the observed object, for example, of the body, they just utilize the observed object of their own body, meditating on its specific characteristic, which is the entity, which is the elements and composites of the elements, and thereafter they meditate on the four general characteristics of their own body, of impermanent, suffering, empty, and selfless. And this is what we see here in the text. Hearers and solitary realizers observe their own bodies, feelings, mind, and phenomena.
전주 선반남 류 잠반 예샤 공묘도 미바디 류래 미도 안데 류 간지 미그레 랍데 전주 선반남기 라신니기 류래 믹스 제가 전주 선반남기 류 잠반 예샤 공도 랑기 류래 미네 잠반 예샤 공 셴기 류래 미 랑게 랑당 랑기 류나 셴기 셈제 셴기 류 레미제 랑다 셴니기 류래 미제 안데 랑게 셴기 제바 공묘다 디디노 지 셴기 제네 공고래제
Bodhisattvas, they don't only observe their own body, for example. The observed objects are the same four, and when they come to meditate on them, for example with the body, they don't only meditate on their own body, but that of their own as well as others. We see this, we cannot read it, okay. Can I Deb look maybe? Look, sorry, can I did read the text? Bodhisattvas, however, observe their own bodies, feelings, mind, and phenomena, and those of all other beings too.
Now, Janju Sembada, Nyandu, Rangedi, Janju Sembana, Lu Lamina, Jambanija, Comiodu, Mibo Ludela, Nyanamgi, Ludi, Sosorang, Lu, Sosoranda, Jambanija, Nyandu Ina, Rangi, Jambanija, Rangi Lulami, Rangedi, comme soso rang korong lu la mi soso rang lu la me ta ma je mi ba de lu de soso rang lu cha de jan ju sem ba nam gi mi ba de soso rang lu re shen gi lu ni ga le mi go re se de je sa mi ba le khabar gar gi do ra se ne je sa jan ju sem ba de gi lu de la mi yu de rang gi lu da shen gi lu ni ga ye de je sa mi ba de la gya che ju ma gya che ju ye de ba je nyen de ge rang yu de rang gi lu chi bu ma da shan dal ma mi ba sa rang lu chi bu ma da ya chung wa che go jan ju sem ba nam gi da mi be lu de la rang gi lu da shen gi lu ni ga le mi ba yin sa da lu de mi be yu lu de gya che wa che go ro.
So we see can take the illustration as of the observed object of the body, that the hearers in solitary realizers only utilize their own body as an illustration. They only meditate on their own body in terms of its specific and then thereafter general characteristics. The Bodhisattva, on the other hand, though, not only meditates on their own body, but also that of others. So we see here that whilst the observed object is identical, in that it is, for example, the body. For the Bodhisattva, the observed object is far broader than for the practitioner of a hearer and solitary realizer lineage.
Na nyandue de gi ne nyandue da ranje de gi lu den ba nye ja kom de rang ge lu chi bo le me je shan da gi lu le mi ma me ba de kar che ba res da de chi to yung gu ro kar chen ma mi go ma re chen ju sem ba de gi rang gi lu da shen gi lu ni ga le mi gu do di kar che re sa ji a ji ko nga ju ge ra shen gi de chi to war da ji war chi li ro da.
I'd imagine right now you have the thought, so why don't hearers and solitary realizers meditate on the body of others and only on their own? And similarly, why do bodhisattvas meditate on the body of others as well as their own?
지상 소소랑 코와래 타야게 삼는데 숙천부 땅에도 탈되게 삼바데 여바 인자 니 타야게 지도 공고로 와다 이 고면도 가르쳐서 소소그 류디에네 지게 류레 미제디에네 소소로마 안에 지 중화시 제 초백에 소소로마 지리 삼백에 나는 나랑 그 류디다 랑 지층이 삼다로다 지 가서 랑의 층이 삼다로 나 지층이 삼다로 나랑 그 류디 미다바 깨지기지 주어를 지루도 제가 지루에 제샤 따고 때문에 제가 나랑 그 류디 지루어 제가 되는사 나랑 조고 탈받 마sob니다 아니 류디 지제 아니 양지 깨와 샹달레선 최치하고 말나 배사기를 삼는 되는 저로 되는사 소소 탈바지부 톱도 톱을 되어 인사 아니 될야 샹유를 삼도 소소그 류를 삼다 아니 소소그 류들 깨지 지배라시샤 아니 될야 아니 동아기 규다 겐데네 진도 동아기 라시레샤 아니 제사 디 동아랑 그 풍보디 코베 동아디 풍보 될레데 마타나 탑민도 선배게 될레 탈고도 선배 소소기 풍보랑래야 아니 동아기 템바 임바다 아니 육 레다 녀모와 때네 주요 군주에 대바 임바 되네기 제바제 제네 될레 탈고도 선배 삼게야다 두스체네 제자다 나랑의 귤라 지층이 삼다도 소소기 귤라 나도 풍벌레면 나 세베 나 다도 주바지 소소 나랑 다들 잠바 나랑 다도 주바지 다진게 랑 다셔 랑와 중에 주바지 짐바게 디 왕게다 녀모 바게다 되는 연구도 진짜 디 짐바데 소소기 귤라 예되게 소소기 풍벌레 미 될레는 나 세베 나랑신 주바지 가서 다도 주바지 지가 가사 다도 주바 짐비 짐바티 가사 다도 주바 디기 안에 롱 제샤기 짐바 진되게 짐바티 달론노트 디방고도 선배게 삼다 되네게 삼다는 소소랑랑기 코발레 탈바 되바 조 디곰구여바 인자 제상 소소랑랑기 풍벌레 되네 괜 지금 미다바 거미하다 다음에 봐 거미하다 둥호 거미하다 삼단 거래 제상 현기 될 집안에 현기 될 삼다는 소소랑랑디 삼단 거 말아 내내사 그 조디 소소랑랑 지부 삼 랑신 랑 제징의 삼백에 타바더니 타바토야도 토비치도 남냠네 지구여바 인자 미바텔라 소소랑랑이 풍포를 미바레세
hearers and solitary realizers, they have as their objective their own individual liberation from samsara. In fact, they're striving with every fiber of their being to achieve freedom from suffering. They're focused wholeheartedly on overcoming their own individual samsara, and focused so single-pointedly on achieving their liberation, they meditate in order to achieve their own liberation. Therefore, when they're meditating on their body, they're meditating on their body, coming to see that it is a true suffering. It is the basis upon which they will suffer. And therefore they reflect that it too is an expression of the origin as well, in that it's an outcome of contaminated karma accumulated by the afflictions. So they're striving for their own liberation. They're focusing on the basis that upon which they experience samsara, and the origin in terms of what keeps them bound in samsara. Coming to the conclusion to strive to make the most of this opportunity that this life does present, and thereby achieve liberation. So, and then when they come to meditating on empty, it's too in relation to only their body, for the same reason. And when they meditate on selfless, they reflect how it's due to grasping at the self or the person as being self-sufficient, substantially existent, that they suffer, that they remain bound and trapped in cyclic existence, and therefore must abandon this wrong consciousness in order to attain freedom. So because the practitioner of a hero or solitary realizer lineage is so laser focused on their own individual liberation, this is what the meditation is focused on, their own individual liberation. Therefore, they focus on their body, the basis of their suffering, and so forth.
소소 라랑기 타바 코르기 동안에 타르체 타바 토바에게 삼로 숙천부 여바인자 데 조지 삼단에 소소 라랑 코르기 동안 타바라 소소 라랑기 풍부들의 미죠 겁나 타바 톱투고로 봐 현기 류의 미제 공바이나 네 소소 라랑 류의 마미바 현기 류의 미네 공바이나 ane sosorang pungpo le kyomana sosorang tarpa thogu sambe samlo di shuk chenpo chi le tuya cheo marwada merwa dine sosorang tarpa thoba la sosorang pungpo tele mine gomna tarpa thop thugu ore dine thugu ene dine lega thewaro shengi pungpo le miche anjika gomya di lega mangara chimado anjike shiragi kyama mejinga samgorwa dine sosorang pungpo khonali mi bare saji. The way we should understand this is in a positive way, in the sense of the hearers and solitary realizers are so focused on their attainment of liberation from their samsara that they, with this incredible strong yearning and determination, that they are meditating on their contaminated body in order to abandon their contaminated body and achieve liberation. And it would be as if they were to think about reflecting on the bodies of others, seeing that they are contaminated too. It would be almost a waste of time, in that it wouldn't help them achieve their liberation. It wouldn't help them abandon their contaminated body and thereby achieve liberation. It would be almost like saying it would be a waste of time. So therefore, we understand the difference in approach through seeing how the hero and solitary realizer is so focused on achieving their individual liberation, they focus solely on the observed object of their own body and so forth. Tene janjisen ban namgi da lu jamba nyaja komyo de mi ba lu la mi de rangi lu da shengi lu ni ga mi go re chirwa da di mi bi gimje ga re lamna janjisen ba se di ne Semchen Tamje Koyu Dungala Droja Sanje Sala Gugin Sibe Jaju Sem Gete Tinza, Jaju Sem Gete Pare. Chisa Semchen Tamji Dunje Go. Chisa Rani Rangda Shen Semchen Chasang Koyu Dungale Tagu Gore. Chisa Tagu Wenza, do some daughter Rangi Lu Nashi Shengi Lutigia, and the Kasa Giji Gasore, Jungashi da Ye Tobe, such a Meloshida, Sutiro Rajas Ge, the Neo Tobe, Druptigan Chede. They are Giji Jibi Raja, they are led on Yomo on the Dungai Raja. As a Semjen Rangi Pumbola, Mija Ranglia, Denige, Dunga Pumbolia, Guru Dunga, the Guru Dunga, Chaba Duji Dunga Chadi, Semjen Diki, Kosi, Semja Shandaji Pumpoti, Chibare, Chesa, Kora Conze Dunga Yunga, Dunga de la Takudu Sembigi, that Janju Sem Kune Lange Semja Tamji Dundala, Sanjoko Toba Deba Yinza, and the Shangi Pumbola Michen in Gasset. Dele mitapa sometime, the Dunga Virasha sometime, and then Dunga with some time, then Delia Kunju Deba, some just a letter, Yomo on the Consu Pumbo di Gyälwa Lembare, just a Pumbo di Gyälwa, Dele Niji on Niji or what, Ninja, Sampeta, Dele Niji Haward, Niji Yoba the Russian Niga, Korea Dunga, Tarba, Sanjoko, Toba Doba Yinza, and the Shengi Rada Shen Niga Mipim Jadi, then the Chawari.
Bodhisattvas, though, as we've heard, they have as their observed object not only their own body but also the body of others. And the reason for this is because the goal of a bodhisattva is to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And what is for the sake of, and why to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings? So as to lead them to a state liberated from suffering, a state of freedom. So therefore, a bodhisattva too is laser focused on achieving their goal, but their goal is far larger. It's enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So with this motivation of all sentient beings as opposed to individual liberation, one can see how their attention is drawn not only to their own situation, but that of others. So they would reflect on the specific and general characteristics of their body, as well as that of all others, seeing how their body and all others is the same in that it is in the nature of suffering. It has come about in dependence on contaminated karma and afflictions. It is a true suffering, and it is a basis upon which all suffering will be experienced. And this is not only their situation, but it's a situation for all other sentient beings. So reflecting like this, compassion arises very strongly within them. And through this compassion then, an ever stronger determination to achieve enlightenment in order to be able to liberate all beings arises within them. So this is why a bodhisattva meditates with the observed object of their own body and that of others too.
Rangye Chenshi Semba Namji, that Jama Lu let me be Jamania Comianza, Combinza, Lu Mieg, Lutela, and the capture Shungi Kaba Yobache, Cesanda, Yana Namji Rangi Lu Konale be the combati, Mibu, Gyältsen Rose teacher, Chenshi Semba Namji, Semjan Tamji, Dunda, Kumgu Yobanza, and then Semjan Tamji. Semjengi, Shengi Lula, Mine, Dunga Yimbata, Dele, Dunga Yimba, Tustene, and the Kunjungi, you Kunjin Badi George, Labardo, and the Niji Kiata, the Neyabanza, the Russian Lula, Mino Combo, I said, that Gyältsen Roji didn't say, Dusche.
This is why there's such a difference in the observed object, that the hearers in solitary realizers, as we see in the text, observe their own bodies, feelings, mind and phenomena only, whereas bodhisattvas, however, observe their own bodies, feelings, mind and phenomena, and those of all other beings too. And this difference comes about due to their different objective. The hearers in solitary realizers are determined to achieve their own individual liberation and therefore only reflect on their own situation. Bodhisattvas, though, are focused on achieving the welfare of all beings. And therefore, they reflect on the situation of all beings. Moreover, in doing so, they use this as a cause to give rise to ever stronger compassion within them. So this is the reason for this uncommon meditation, or unshared meditation.
Konzu sungtang do de jiba ro chi de jiyon de ne chi shi sar sung yin sar jera ma wa na de be de sung go ro wa da sung go de ge di pe jin na la da rang gyu ba de ne shi de konzu na sung ba xie ba na xin yin chi xie go le che da de din de rang gyu go xie go la di xie da de rang gyu to na xie xie ru go chi da rang gyu ba da konzu di xie de meni jera ma wa dan de ba konzu ge di gomnadi kyaba shigorowa digi kyaba di rowoji di nashinji su dagara sungshegoro ku shigore dade lule misi kyaba shigidowa zo sui shigoro sindi jera mawadan dode batiki ki shigore eje jezada rangyu badan khonzugi shidi khonzugi sungba nashin dagara rowoji shigo jikba na shesha madu mixigi kyaba dida di cheba chine sungo mare.
This explanation that I've given is precisely in accordance with what the Vaibhashikas and the Sautrantikas all assert, and there probably isn't much difference at all with, for example, what the Svatrantika Madhyamakas will assert.
Dadi ngoso sunye zodi koran da ngombo kundi da ngombo zue na le sungorwa chesna digi namcha di da dine sungba de ngombo zue da kundi na sungba na garan shijaru chi ma sung shar ma de mixi ge kyabra chen dine shimje chen dine sunggo marwa.
And the source material here is the two Abhidhammas, the upper and lower Abhidhammas, or the Abhidhammas of Vasabandhu, the Chögyi of knowledge, and the Abhidhamma of Asanga, the compendium of knowledge. And so this explanation is in accordance with that, and there probably isn't any variance elsewhere with the presentation here on the first of the points, that of the observed object.
Da yile cheba sayadi so yile cheba sayadi di tendo da lu le mine mi ba lu le mine lu tendo ji chen sam dang ta de xi wo de yile cheba sayadi ha de ji da bo na ni lo sa sa mi ba sa mi ba da yile cheba da to ba da sum sayadi da mi ba xie sar so mi ba de da xie sar wa da yin ni ba de yile cheba xi go ro wa da yile cheba sayadi kar ji ne xi go ro se ne de ji mi ba So in
this section then of the unique or uncommon ways to meditate in the four close placements of mindfulness, we've looked at the first of the three, that of the observed object. Now we come to the second, that of mental engagement. The observed object is what is meditated on. Mental engagement is the way that one mentally engages in that meditation. So that now is what we'll look at. Looking at the text. Hearers in solitary realizers mentally engage in meditation on impermanent, suffering, empty, and selfless. Bodhisattvas, however, meditate on non-observable signs of phenomena.
Rangda ji chenyi da ne gom gu ro che da da ji chenyi gom de kar chi go re se ne ne mi da ba sa de ne rang lu le mi ne rang lu gi tian do lu de ne zhen bie jin che tel ya ne xie le gi mi da ba se che ba chi ne mi da ba de che ba chi mi da ba gi ji bi kim che mi da ba ma che ba che ya da de ne rang lu le mi ne rang lu di ne dung ha ye ra xi yin ba dung ha wa yin ba che ba che gom ya ane dene rangi lui la mine lui di ane tawa tacho rangaji ni madruba di cheba chikomya ane rangi lui la mine rangi lui di kansa rangi di bezesum madruba ane cheba chene komya di ane dene ge nyana namgi dene kongore di cheba chene kongore chere
Looking at the first one, heroes in solitude realizers mentally engage in meditation on impermanence, suffering, empty and selfless. Here they would take as an observed object one of the four, say the body, and they would hold it with mindfulness, investigate with wisdom. So that having first investigated the specific characteristic, they then investigate now the general characteristic. And the general characteristic, starting with that of impermanence, seeing that their own body is impermanent. Thereafter, they reflect, having reflected on its momentary nature, they reflect that the body is in the nature, their body is in the nature of suffering, and coming to see that it's in the nature of suffering because it's come about in dependence on contaminated karma accumulated by afflictions. They then meditate on their body as being empty of being permanent, unitary and independent, as well as then the self as lacking a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, or the person lacking self-sufficiency as substantial existence. So this is how the heroes in solitary realizers engage in this meditation on their own body.
Janju Semba Namji, so Janju Semba Namji, Chögyi Tsamar de Mimi Bar, Gombar Chibi Chir Sidu, that Janju Semba Namji Rangi Lula Mine, Chi Tsini Gomyadu, Mida Bada, Ndunga Wada, Tonwada, and Kansa Rangi Tsumatuba di Kumgore. Di Gala Karakumgor Senedine, Temamatuba Samta Kumgore, Tem Rangi Kasore, Tsama, Chögyi Tsama. Tembar mimi ba sidu Chögyi chama der mimi chama sin tembar tuba sigore jisan tembar matuba ke ti ten do tongba ni tembar matuba samta na kum gore jere chama sin tembar tuba sigore chambar mimi ba la de tembar mami ba tembar matuba samta kum gore je mi de jisu de 미소 미데스 미바드 수르와 대신에 전시심이 미베 유티 가르송거라신 대신 개발시와 냐나남기 호랑 풍범 미치부 미그래 전시심 받음기 라신이 유리를 미그래라 지다 라신이 유리를 미야디 텔미지 지선요 고명도 아니 미다소바다 동아 담메시 고마 디텐도 가르고서 소 동반이 담메 동반이 삼당 고모레스 대마마미 바지 삼당 고모레지래
Bodhisattva then, when observing for example, the body, the observed object of the body would be their own, as well as that of others. They would reflect on the general characteristics that the body is impermanent, that it's in the nature of suffering, that it is not permanent, unitary, or independent, or is empty of being permanent, unitary, and independent, and that the person lacks self-sufficiency, substantial existence. Thereafter, as we see in the text, bodhisattvas, however, meditate on non-observable signs of phenomena. So thereafter, bodhisattvas meditate on the emptiness of inherent existence. And this term here, signs, we can understand as inherent existence or true existence, perhaps as true existence. And then the bodhisattva here meditates on the emptiness of true existence as an additional general characteristic.
Da dine da delia chabar kardus labna nyara namji ane rangi lula mi che di tendo ane chi chenye se de mida tonga da me ba shi de kumor ma do tongba ni samda tongba ni kumgo marwa ne janju semba namji ane gar yor sene rangi chi se mida tonga da me shi komba di gang la ya ane tongba ni samdaji 동반이 공고와 대마마루바 삼당 공고와 지스 캐바디 태와 가르선 대마마루 삼당 공고와.
So therefore the difference here, what is uncommon or unique, is that the bodhisattvas also meditate on emptiness. the four general characteristics, as we saw previously, they are shared between the three lineages of beings, heroes, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. But what is uncommon is that in addition to those four general characteristics, the bodhisattva also meditates on the emptiness of true existence.
Kumato tomba nyu kumgumido asti garcheres ta janju semba nam yu tomba nyu kumgor di garcheres achi dejina jin chibarwa ta garre lamna nyana namgi nyanyu na nyanyu di pene nyanyu namgi ta di rangi phumba la mi che ane chi chinye dunga tonga ta me ba shi komye kimje garasna tarba tobi tuchido kumgor tarbe ko ba 소소라랑 탈비 고마 토비치도 공고래. 제가 소소라랑 탈바 토발라 동유도 별로 개화야. 동유 또 화요 말했지. 제가 가서 다음에 봐또 비고 로디 공바 공나 디 공바래 때니 녀모바 방투 고래스. 제가 녀모 방투 거. 제가 탈바 토발라 가서 다음에 봐 다음에 봐또 로디 공고. 디 인자 곧 디텐도 풍부에 랑이 풍부에 텐도 다음에 봐 조어치는 공고래스. 다음에 봐 미비기 다 대시 쇼회시 받는 솔람바디에나 다음에 발음에 실력 손에 마토바서 디토비치도 공고래. 난 전람바다디네 야제 통람바 디게 다음에 발음이 비신에서 톱차와리디네 그 녀모바 밤비치도 디텐도 다음에 봐 조 다음에 봐 공고래스. 공고비 김전디리다 그래서 타바토발라 다음에 봐 또베 로디 공부 디마 pom바나 녀모 빠도고 말 타바토발라 녀모 바차산 빵베 빵베기 빵바 타바토고래 디 타바토발라 가자 다음에 봐 또베 로디 공부래 제가 가자 다음에 봐 또베 로디 공부할 때는 타바토고래 제가 돈이 또 고고요 말와.
To understand then the reason for this difference is that heroes and solitary realizers, they have as their observed object, for example, their own body. And in order to realize their goal of their own liberation from samsara, they consider that all they need to meditate on is selflessness, or the selflessness of persons. There is no need for them to meditate on emptiness. So therefore, when they are on the path of accumulation, and they're meditating on the selflessness of persons, and they'll try and hold it with first with calm abiding, and thereafter with a union of calm abiding meditative insight, they will just be doing this meditation on selflessness of persons because they believe that that is sufficient to lead to their individual liberation. And when they have the union of calm abiding meditative insight on that the person lacks self-sufficient substantial existence, they then have attained their path of preparation and will continue to meditate on the selflessness of persons to try and gain a direct realization. And again, this comes down to that they believe that to attain individual liberation, the realization that is required is the selflessness of persons. That is what will lead to the attainment of individual liberation.
다음에 봐도 별로디 다 돈이 또 또야치는 다음에 또 또야 레라요로 레라기로와 제가 레라고 인자 레라요자 디 콤발에 때네 코발에 타르투 코와 그 녀모 바치사 빠제 타바 톱투고 그래 제가 데니기 람레 데니지 콤제 타바 톱고네 데레 칼레카 돈이데 삼다 되베네 칼레카 저체 데니 지게 고바 가서 김생 고바 김생 가서 채와 가요 말 가서 저 타바토도 그러와 제가 돈이 겁나 타바토블레 나와야 말와 제가 다음에 봐도 별로도 공부하는 타바토도 그래 제가 돈이 공부할 믹스기 공고야스 가요 말이지 그래.
Of the two, meditating and realizing the selflessness of persons and realizing the wisdom, cultivating the wisdom realizing emptiness or realizing emptiness, of the two, realizing the selflessness of persons is much easier. And as this much easier the attainment of this much easier realization leads to one's own individual liberation, which is one's goal, one's sole objective. Therefore, why make it more difficult for oneself? Why meditate on emptiness, trying to cultivate this much more difficult realization of the wisdom realizing emptiness, when it's not necessary to achieve one's own individual liberation. Therefore, they meditate solely on the selflessness of persons. Therefore, amongst all those of hero and solitary realizer lineage, there are very few that realize emptiness. Certainly there'll be some who do realize emptiness, but they're very few because they don't see the purpose for putting so much more effort into achieving something much more difficult, when the simpler realization will lead to their desired goal. That's all I'm chungoro chireda. That's diga suko janjusim gulake delia toni jeba toni samta that ko tabachim chunyamle jegenza tabachim chunyamle jebala ko toni ko sung je de je toni nyamle je jiza ko tomba ni to ba le je da tomba ni to sane ko janjusim solam chungwenza denige shen yu duen jebal pe masida kalya khaboda 가와 방부 심제 된제바 되니게 심진이 된제발 심진 장을 대반사 지 심진 가시 빼 지게 가제 파야고 제나 아니 지게 야고 마시해 빼 제제방한 바타 되니게 지지 아니 되니 심슈 자자 오다 당이 심진 탐지게 된지 두사 말에 선비게 안 되니게 심슈 자도 janjusim gyula tongru kores. Jinade janjusim gyula tongru ko janjusim bada delede dangi semjan tamjigi dönje tusa mara dangi kalekya tusa mara ngone dini inza da nyagap sosorarang da tarba tumde digutse besam kyedu dini ko janjusim tongsare. Dini ko nyanduge lamliya ko kabri kashi nyanduge lam charore dini rangye lam yungore dini ki chane dini ki nyanduge da rangye digi janjusim sol nyanduge da rangye solam bayina da jolam bayina dini ki nyema janjusim kiye sa tongyo to sa dini janjusim ki sem tongche ma lam lu shudigen nyanduge da rangye yoro o disu ki tongyo to go re jerida. To achieve individual liberation, one has to abandon the afflictions together with their seeds. And in order to do so, they believe that just the realization of the selflessness of persons is sufficient. So therefore, and as that realization is much easier than the realization of emptiness, there's no need to engage in the meditation on emptiness. And because there's no need to engage in the meditation on emptiness, there's no need to receive teachings on how to engage in the meditation of emptiness. And as their teachers are striving for their own individual liberation too, their teachers will also not have received teachings on how to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness, because for them too it is unnecessary. So therefore, those of hero and solitary realizer lineage are not even going to come across the teachings on how to develop the wisdom realizing emptiness, nor would they particularly seek them out, because they are unnecessary, they are deemed unnecessary. Therefore, the vast majority of heroes and solitary realizers do not realize emptiness, because they see that there's no need for it, and they do not even come across the teachings, nor seek them out. However, there are some who do have a realization of emptiness. And those would be heroes and solitary realizers who first entered the Mahayana path of accumulation. So they generated bodhicitta and would have had a realization of emptiness. having generated the path of the bodhisattvas in their continuum and attained the first level of the path of accumulation, of the Mahayana path of accumulation, the small level of the path of Mahayana accumulation, they then would have found the prospect of accumulating a massive amount of merit of a huge number of lifetimes in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all beings as too daunting. And they would have their bodhicitta, which was still new and fragile, would degenerate and be lost. They'd fall then from the Mahayana path of accumulation and immediately enter into the Thevadan path of accumulation, because they have the uncontrived definite emergence and they will enter that path of accumulation. But having fallen from the Mahayana path of accumulation is due to having lost their bodhicitta. Whatever realization of emptiness they had, they would still have. And now they would enter and continue to develop on the Thevadan paths of accumulation and preparation and onwards.
Within the Dombanyo Kumgoyama, Tajambe Devo Tovala, Dombanyo Kumkumar, the Jibarwa, the Jasan Jibarwa, Tajambe Devo Tovala, Nawa, that is Janjusim Solamba, Janjusim Yam, Yandulam, Ju and Lagurwa. Jason Konzo Garci Horsanda, Janjusim Gom to Samara, so Tarbatum the Dugu, Tarbo go on Dundunia Gurwa. Jason Tarbo go on Dundunia, La Carson Gaza Dame, about to below the committee to Jibarwa, the Jibare. The Gabriel Nyama Tombanyo Gomba, Cap Capla, Tombanyo Gomba, Yungur, in a so Gomia de Tame Pocumore.
When those who have gone from the Mahayana path of accumulation to the Thevadan path of accumulation, now they have as their goal their own individual liberation. So whilst they are starting on the path of accumulation with a realization of emptiness, they will put their energy into meditating on the selflessness of persons, because that is all that they need to realize to achieve individual liberation. So therefore, they are most likely, although one can't say exclusively, but most likely to meditate primarily or solely even on the selflessness of persons.
That Janjusemba to Tonio Comgo Tirwada, Janjusemba Namgi, and the Garsorosene, Ilacheta, that did Yandunam Shirwada. That Janjusemba Namgi, and the Ditiendo Rangulu, Ranshanigu, Lamine, Ditiendo, and it Gyältsen, Mitaton, Tameshi, Digala, so Temamatuba de Cumbores. Di Gomgoba de Carrelabna, Sanji Govan Tobala, and Yumo Jiba Basha, the Shiripango Kurva. Chizan Shiripango Winda, Shiripa de Ganza Damebo Combegi, Shiripan to Gomare, Chizan Tomba Yutobe Locum Gore, Chizan Diniza, Janjusemba Namgi, Tomba Yuto Cumgore, Citadina de Ditiendo, Midaton, Dame, Shi Cumgordina, Zo Cargoso, Tomba Nila Dito, Tomba Nila Mibigi, that Solamba Chung in the Cinema top mena, Tomba Nila Mibi Shine Tuviada. That Solam Tomba Denisine Tobaina, Tomba Nila Mibi Shine Dingane, Tomba Nitila Mine, and the Lauton Comia. And so to go. That in it, the negative Jolamba, Janjusima Jolamba, Tolamba Honozo, that's Tombanishini, she lost on the top sour at the Inea, Carson Tombanilla, maybe she lost on the Gomgars and Shiripango or Shiripango. Just that Dineza, that Janjusima Namgi, Tonu Congo, the Kumzekarelana, Dame Bachibukumna, Nakasa Shiripan to go, Marineza, Janjusima, so Panjo, the Shiripanjo, Chiubaza. That the Nyembodi don't need to be shared up to the Neza, don't need to be shared up or Resetira.
Bodhisattvas, however, as we see in the text, meditate on the non-observable signs of phenomena, or in other words, they meditate on the emptiness of true existence. And they will do so with the observed object of for example, the body, of their own as well as that of others. They'll meditate on the same four general characteristics, but primarily on the emptiness of true existence. So the here in solitary realizers meditate primarily on selflessness, the bodhisattvas primarily on the emptiness of true existence. And in a sense, they do so, they have their own different primary meditations for a similar reason. This is what's required to achieve their goal. For the here in solitary realizer, just the realizing selflessness is sufficient to abandon the afflictions together with their seeds and attain liberation. The bodhisattva though, that realization is insufficient for the attainment of enlightenment, because that realization only abandons the afflictions together with their seeds. It doesn't abandon the stains of the afflictions. The stains need to be abandoned for the obscurations to liberation to be obscurations to enlightenment, obscurations to omniscience to be abandoned. Therefore, the bodhisattva, in terms of the general characteristics, meditates primarily on the emptiness of true existence in order to eliminate the stains of the afflictions, to overcome the obscurations to omniscience. Whereas the practitioner of hero and solitary realizer type, they only need to overcome the obscurations to liberation to achieve their goal.
Dadi dostine janyu semba da nyandwe de yila che da rangi ti tian de mi ba so beneda lule mine komna dine de dina ji ba ro mi ba so wale che bai ne komna ji ba che go re da mi ba de semla che bai na komna ji ba de shwe le che bai ne da mi ba khar che bai na da di de yila che da di da dostine nyandwe nam che nyandwe da ran ji yila che ji cinyu komna de na janyu semba ji cinyu komna de da kya ba dos cha go ro.
To now say clearly, because it's not explicitly mentioned in the text, but in terms of mental engagement, whatever the observed object is, whether it's the body, the feelings, the mind, or phenomena, whatever the observed object is, there is this difference in mental engagement by, on the one hand, the hero and solitary realizer, who meditates on the general characteristics, the four of them, specifically, though primarily rather, on selflessness, and the bodhisattva, whatever their observed object is, they too meditate on the four general characteristics, but primarily on what is in addition, which is cultivating the wisdom, realizing the emptiness of true existence. So therefore, whatever the observed object amongst the four, whatever the observed object is, this difference in mental engagement, this unshared or uncommon way to meditate, remains.
Dadi doschine yila che rangi chi cinyo kom nang khebara che di rangyu bada sem zam bada dorje bada jera mawaru che gore. Da tenyu ba yima ina da tenyu bo khoronge tumo mai ba dadi she da songda de nga jugi 지다 투모 와서 저거로 다 텐주보 그런 거 투모 많이 봐셔봐 있나 텐주보 그런 투모 많이 봐셔도 년뒤에 나다 라제에 나다 전시선 바이 나다 디디의 지수ny고 동반ny고 뭐래 동반이 지사 지수ny 동반ny고 뭐 지바래 캬발 매래 디미다바도 고마도 동하고 하다 다음에 봐 고마 디가데 조 동반이 지사 디데도 조 아니 미바 류기 때도 지수ny고 뭐 지수ny 조 동반ny고 뭐다 아니 지층이 저 동반이 고미야 저거데 텐기불라 년되이나 지층이 동반이 공고래 아니 라제네 지층이 동반이 공고래 전선바이네 지층이 저 동반이 공고 동반이 공다 지바래 가르스네 나다 공다 지바래 신이래 디시.
What's presented thus far in terms of mental engagement and the difference between, on the one hand, heroes and solitary realizers, and on the other hand, bodhisattvas, this is the view of the Vabhashikas, the Sautrantikas, the Chittamatrans, and the Svatrantika Madhyamakas. The Prasangikas have a different assertion. They hold that to achieve their goal, heroes, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas meditate on all four general characteristics of impermanent, suffering, empty and selfless, and in addition to those four, all three types of practitioners also meditate on the emptiness of true existence. So the key difference is the Prasangika say, hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas all meditate on the emptiness of true existence.
And Elena, Tenuba, Koranzo, Tenubi to Mamma Korashe, do Numo Pambala, Tombani do horse, Gansa Damet, do horse, Gansa Dame said, Tony is or that Tenubula, Gansa Dame, and Chigi Dame in Sigidi, called Garjala Cabario Mares, rather Garja the Carson Rashing Trupa, Rashing Trupa Capade. Chisandika, the she Gansagi, Tendu, Gardu, and the Gansa Dame, and then she, and the Garsore. Gansa le shen Chögyi dino kaya do Chögyi dame sigur. Chisa da nyomo gaji le tarpa toba la nyomo ba pangko, nyomo ba pangpa la tongpa nyi tepe lo ma gompa nyomo pang togo ma re. Chisa dine inza da nyendwe da raja dike chachumbe tibu togo tarpa togo la nyomo pangko, nyomo pangpa la tongpa nyi kumko res. Chisa tongpa nyi ma toba ane Gansa da zindi pang togo ma res, nyondwe pang togo ma res. Chisa dine inza nyondwe chachumbe tibu toba la inji mi nyondri nyomo ba pangor pambala tongni to lo magom na pangthong mare tene za da nyendye na raja na chasa chesu sumga gasore tamanya je komyo de chi cheni mita tongwa dame ba digala tongba ni kongo ba kyabaro mare dame se da tongju gyugo wa gyugu mare 제가 tengyubulula Chögyi dame 세다 Gansa dame sidu gacha la charayo mare 제가 gacha di denpa drupache denpa drupade Gansa ge tendu kapege gayombe chadila Gansa dame le gore ta Gansa le shenbi pungpo na shengi tendu kape gayombe ne Chögyi dame le gore ta won ma rangyu manji shedu Gansa dame le yondu chasang de yorde ine Gasha le charayo, just a Gansa Damiki, Gomia Gansa Dado Jubati, Gasha Rapache, and then Demba Jubalane, Tawares, and the Tranjuba di Shigura, di Shigura. That many that did Tinjubala, Gasore, Gansa Dame, Chögyi Dame said, Charayo Mara, Jibare. Just that Rangubada, then many Sem Zabaina, Gansa Dame, Chögyi Dame said, Charaka, you did it.
Prasangika amongst Prasangika's unique views, they are alone in asserting that the wisdom realizing emptiness, the wisdom realizing the selflessness of persons, and the wisdom realizing the selflessness of phenomena are the same, and all three need to be realized by hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. So Prasangikas make a differentiation in terms of the basis of emptiness. They don't make a differentiation in terms of object of negation. So this is going to get a little detailed, but the key point to take away, which was already said now, is that Prasangikas say that hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas need to realize emptiness, which is synonymous with selflessness. Only Prasangika assert this, and they say that this has to be done in order to attain liberation, in other words, abandon the afflictions and their seeds, as well as enlightenment, to abandon the afflictions, their seeds, and their stains. So that is unique to the Prasangikas. And then to go into that in more detail, Prasangikas differentiate in terms of the basis that is realized to be empty, not in terms of the object of negation. So selflessness of persons for the Prasangika refers to the person being selfless, or the person being empty of inherent existence is the selflessness of persons for the Prasangika, and for the form aggregate or for other phenomena other than the person, their selflessness is the selflessness of phenomena. Or, to express that differently, phenomena other than the person are realized to be empty of true existence, and that is called the selflessness of phenomena. So selflessness of persons refers to the basis of the person, and everything else is referred to as the selflessness of phenomena, and both are realized to be empty of true existence. So that is unique to Prasangika. The other tenets either only assert selflessness of persons and don't talk about selflessness of phenomena or emptiness of inherent existence, and that's the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, or the Chittamatrans and the Svatrantika Madhyamakas, they say the selflessness of phenomena, that realization is subtler than the realization of the selflessness of persons. Prasangika don't say that. They say those realizations are the same. It's emptiness of inherent existence. So there's quite a difference there between the Prasangika and the non-Prasangikas.
Tenju Bilula Kansa Time Labdi Comedy, she Kansa Chi Tendo Gomna Mado Shenge Tendo Comia Yomare, Kansa Time Comia, Tenju Bilula, Injimeja Kansa Chi La Miche, Di Tendo Comcore, Chizan, a Kansa Time Comedy, Chizan, Deneza, Kansale, Shambi, Suta, and the Kawada, Mitapata, the sweet into Kansa Time said the Comia Yomare. Zada, Deneza, Kansa Coron La Miche, Kansa Coron, Demba Maduba de la Kansa Time Labore. Tangible. Chögyi Dame said that Kansa Mayanki Shen Chasang Tendo Gomia Yedigan. Ija Kansa Tendo Gomia Medicine. Chögyi Dame said Kansa Le Shen Big Chögyi, Demaduba de la Kansa, Chögyi Dame Lago, Chesan di Keba Yore. That on ma Rangu Bada Dinamaji Kansa Dame said Karajagres and Di Chö Tamji Tendo Gomia Yore Lagore. Di Gare Labna. Kansa Pumpo da Cheche Kala Rangun Madubi Kala Maduba Rangun Drubdiking and the Kansikos or Ranja to be Zisuba Kansasha. Digi launches Maduba de la Kansa Tameladi, some check and Digi launches Maduba some die or Relago. Chisandi, Kansa Tamesadi, Tengu Bula di Kansa Tame Chagio Mare, Kansa Tame Rabalak Mother, Kansa Tame Marella or Tengu Pigi. Chisandi, one Mashe Kansa Tamesadi. Chö Tamje to Comia Yore Sigure. Canimba Laptan Kaza, I met 6 Juba Jiba in there, Donda Kacha, Tengu Share did one Mashe get the Gaza Tamesedi.
All Buddhists talk about the need to realize selflessness of persons. They all use this word. For the very lowest schools, they'll probably just say selflessness. But everyone would agree that it's selflessness of person that needs to be realized. What is meant by this? There's some difference. Difference between Prasangika and the non-Prasangikas. So Prasangikas say that if we're meditating on the selflessness of persons, this has as its the basis that is selfless is the person only. Whereas the non-Prasangikas may assert something different. For example, and there is difference between the non-Prasangikas, but to take as an illustration, the Svatrantikas, the autonomists, the Svatrantika Madhyamakas, they will say all phenomena are lack a self of persons. Not only the person is selfless of persons, but all phenomena are lack a self of persons. What does that mean? It means that the phenomena, for example, the table, is not utilized by a self-sufficient, substantial, existent self, and therefore it is lacking being utilized by a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, and that is how the table, for example, is an illustration, how the table is an illustration of selflessness of persons. Whereas the Prasangika would say The table is an illustration of the selflessness of phenomena, because it's not the basis is not the person, but phenomena, and therefore the table, lacking inherent existence, is the emptiness of the table, and that would be called the selflessness of phenomena. The person alone is a basis for the selflessness of persons, whereas Prasangika don't say this. Svatantika don't say this. Every phenomenon lacks a self of persons, because if the phenomenon is something other than a person, it is not utilized by a self-sufficient, substantial existent self. And even this realization of the selflessness of persons, of Svatantika and below, that the person does not exist as a self-sufficient, substantial existent self, that is not selflessness according to Prasangika. That is coarse selflessness. It is not subtle selflessness. So here again we see another difference between Prasangika and the non-Prasangikas.
Lula mine and community and elected rank cheese in your dame bacumgores, changes and banamji and a casore tombanyucumgores, Tigala tombanyucumgores. Daddy, Cabra de Dishe and Rangubata, Samsambada, Dodebada, Ceramo, said the Gitila imba, the Tata remenu, the Cerama Dodeba Mare, the Ranguba the Samsam Beson Haredi, Simsam Sonade. Changisemba namji, Lula miner, Ji Tinucum de Metadon, Ton Tamage Diga to Tombanice, Tombani de Zo Concores, Tombani Zo Concores, and San Jacobo Tobala, Tombani Concores, Zo Concores. Changisemba Rajuba, Rajuba Sunday. That Jerama many disonadi, the G Sonadi, the Che, the Chera, Casatodia, but Dodia Pada, Semsabani Sonace. Dicing Shiga Serimino. Padire. Da Jeramo on Dode Venila, Chibare, Changisembada, Comia, Range Comia, Yendio Comia, Dame about the Chipare, Chavayomare, Denubane, Tinubanashin, Chavamevare, Conzu Carsone, Comjala, Changisembada, Range and Yendu Sumio, Comjala, Chavayomar, Chisan Conzu, so Dame Bocomere, Chisan Dinza, Yendu. Range changes semba Sumgala, Dodeba, Castle Dodeba, Jeramavini, Yulu Chebena, the Mitapatame Bokobachi Barimato, and in Cavacaya Mares.
Perhaps something that was said earlier was a little mistaken, so let's represent just part of what has been said to make sure it's been said correctly. So, when there's an observed object, or for example the body, then the hearers in solitary realizers will meditate primarily on the general characteristic of selfless, whereas bodhisattvas will meditate primarily on emptiness. This is the view of only the Chittamatans and Svatantikas. What I may have said incorrectly earlier is now in the next segment. The Svatantika and Vaibhashika, they make an assertion which on one level is the same as the Prasangika, on the superficial level is the same as the Prasangika. So here we can say, Svatantika, Vaibhashika and Prasangika, they all say that hearers and solitary realizers, as well as bodhisattvas, only need to meditate on the selflessness of persons in order to achieve their respective goals. Within this, though, there is a difference of understanding with what is meant by selflessness of persons. On the one hand, the Prasangika, and on the other, the Svatantika and Vaibhashika. They have a different understanding of what is selflessness of persons. But they agree that the three lineages of practitioners will achieve their goal solely through the meditation on selflessness of persons.
Nyendu namji mita tunga dameshu nila chigires, chanju semba namji di galia, tombanye, 아니 동반이 삼다제 동반이 공고래 세티 제가 개발디어래 년도에다 라제디게 동반이 공고 말에 또 전주선바디게 동반이 공고래 세티 개발 체디다 디나도 셰디 당한쪽에 되게 받아 샘샘이 루시야시 셰바래 다디래 다 디셰 다 세부체도 다 텐주 되게 받아 샘샘이 다디셰디 되게 받아 샘샘이 디나셰 되게 받아 샘샘이게 가서 되게 받마다 라주바 라주바다 샘샘바다 라주베 시자로 시거디가 셰디다 다 라주바다 샘샘이 시다 두세 다 당하주게 세부 수용도 텐주발라 캐바려 말에서 좋아 년제다 라제니 공바 라제다 전주선바 숨가 고미에 될라 디일에 제바들라 대시 동아 메다바도 동아와 동아다 아니 제가 라제도 비슷수도 동아다 디가 동반이 고미에 될라 캐바르메스 지가 차상 공고를 지켜요 말이지 다 디나시 매년 년도에 가서 되대바다 제라마원이래 캐바려 말에서 디디는 코너스 메다바 공하다 동아와 고미야 나 동아 고미야 아니 가사라 유튜브 세수도 공바 지바래 전선바디에 지바래 년도에 당하셔 지바래 고미야 캐바메스 다디 캐바데 다디 돈다디 세우르 디레셔다.
Then let's present each of the tenets. So the Chittamatrans and the Svatantikas, or the mind-only school and the autonomous middle way school, they say that the bodhisattvas alone need to meditate on emptiness. The bodhisattvas alone need to meditate on emptiness. The hearers in solitary realizers do not in order to achieve their objective. Prasangika Madhyamakas, or the consequence middle way school, they say that all three lineages, hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, need to meditate on the four general characteristics, but primarily on emptiness. Primarily on the emptiness of inherent existence. So that's their primary mental engagement, according to the Prasangika. Then, the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika, the Great Exposition School and the Sutra School, they also say that hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, they need to meditate on only the selflessness of persons. But here, what they mean by that is that the self lacks self-sufficient substantial existence, which is very different from the meaning of Prasangika, of what selflessness means, which is the emptiness of inherent existence. So Prasangika, Vaibhashika, and Sautrantika all say hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas need to meditate on primarily on the same topic, on the same have the same object of abandonment. But what is meant by that, what is meant by selflessness of persons, is very different. Vaibhashika and Sautrantika don't talk about emptiness at all. Prasangika says selflessness of persons and emptiness are synonymous.
다 토비 개발해서 톱자 가르래서 가르치도 가르토비치도 공고래서 아디시오래 다 냐나 남제 사지유 류소단 제유 자와 코니 치르콤라 시데 가르치도 공고래서네 가르치도 공고래 나나 다 냐나데 고미아디 가르스나 소수기 레다 뉴모 사지유 류코나 대단 자제 코니시도 제위치도 공고래 시자 코니시도 자제 탈바토비야가 또 토비야에 가서 탈바점 토비치도 공고를 해지래. 아니 다 자주선바 남기 내가르 공고를 람나 아니 류코니치도 자제 탈바점 토비치도 공부하려서 네 말에서 내가 가르치도래서 미니베 상여고바 토비치도 공고를 해서 미니베 냐디 토비치도 공부시르스 다 미니베 전주선바 남기 대단 잠마데 이게 칠 마인기 미니베 냐디 주비치도 공부 지비치스 전주선바 남기 가서 사시 류코네 치도 자와 코네 치다 안데단 자제 타바점 토비치도 공부 말에서 내가 미유조데 가서 녀모 바샤다 제바 빠지 미니베 냐디 토비치도 공부를 해지래.
And coming to the third section, that's on attainment. So here, reading from the text, hearers and solitary realizers meditate to attain freedom from their contaminated bodies, feelings, mind, and phenomena only. So the heroes and solitary realizers are striving to abandon their contaminated aggregates in order to achieve their own individual liberation. That is their goal, mere liberation, or solely their own liberation, and doing so through abandoning their contaminated body, feelings, mind, as well as phenomena. Bodhisattvas, on the other hand, we see here, however, just first with the heroes and solitary realizers, their attainment, their goal is individual liberation. Now we come to bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas, however, do not meditate to become free or not free from their contaminated bodies, feelings, mind, and phenomena, but rather to attain non-abiding nirvana. Bodhisattvas then have a different goal, not their individual liberation like heroes and solitary realizers, but that of non-abiding nirvana, which is a synonym for enlightenment. So bodhisattvas are striving for enlightenment or non-abiding nirvana. That is their attainment that they're striving to achieve. So what we see here for bodhisattvas, the wording is a little unusual, so it's good to understand what is being said here clearly. Bodhisattvas, however, do not meditate to become free or not free from their contaminated bodies, feelings, mind, and phenomena, but rather to attain non-abiding nirvana. What this is indicating is their primary objective, what they're striving for, is non-abiding nirvana. That is what they want to achieve. Or to express it with the usual synonym, they're striving for enlightenment. Or to express it in a third way, they're striving for Buddhahood in order to be of greatest benefit to beings. That is their goal. Now we compare this to the heroes and solitary realizers, and we see here they're striving for freedom from their contaminated bodies, feelings, mind, and phenomena only. So only striving to abandon their contaminated aggregates. Only. That's their only goal. For bodhisattvas then, their goal is enlightenment. But then we see here, they do not meditate, bodhisattvas do not meditate to become free or not free from their contaminated bodies. What this is referring to is they do not have as their objective to abandon their contaminated aggregates. This is not their objective. Their objective is enlightenment. However, on their way to attaining enlightenment, they do abandon their contaminated aggregates. This is not their goal. They're not focusing on this. This isn't at the forefront of their mind at all. It just happens. In that, as they're developing, progressing towards enlightenment, they abandon their contaminated aggregates. As a side attainment, one can say. So this is the meaning of They do not meditate to become free or not free of their contaminated aggregates. They're not intentionally striving to become free of their contaminated aggregates. So there we have not free. But they do become free of their contaminated aggregates whilst progressing towards the attainment of non-abiding nirvana.
Oh yeah, Bendigo, that Geshe that Jamanyasha, Komna Bendigo, Chikshavan, Chiodu, Tangazuine, that calls me, Geshe then Yanda Ranja Chazan, that Bendigo, Chiktamanyasha, Komiadi, Karichido Kumgors, and Tarvata Tamji Kimiko to be Chido, Unkovi Dunga Litrovich to Kumgor, Chazan, Dini and Zam, and Bendigo Lam Yamlin Majavina, Tarvata Tamji Kimiko to go, Lam Yamlin Dinichebalatin to Bore, Dinizat, Aranzuinea, the Kons in Yamle Jevanashi, Janzuine, Bendigo Lam de Guleke, Yamlin Chitua Chikin, Sambegan, Zuke, Machike, Dumba, Bendigo. Yeah, Bendigo Neta, Susara in Neda, Chike, Zuki, that Konsekumba Nashin Chene, Sosuki Lulia, and Chik Shimjuche, Ludikan Shima, the Chepache, and the Luitalia, and the Mitaba, some Tayada, Chiwa Metaba, some Taya, on those Chene, some time, and did Gishi Deseranex, Guleta Nyomo, Onguchuari, Chezadunga Rashin Cherry, said Delia, and those comedy, as Lulia, Chike. Lui da Sowata sim Chögyi ne Chaba Magyavada, Magye to the Duschu comedy, Azina Dusche sometime. Dinigida Metabari, Chisa Dininza, and Dunga Rashil, Dele Targudua, Sanze. Chisadanga Pumboti ne Tato Madubare, and the Temba Madubare, Chisa Tapa Timbu Yomare, Chisa Dininza, Azuki Delia, Chakshin Che, Ludi, Nyomobare, that is Chik Midua, Sampiki, sometimes Yanzukita, Titone. Geshe Thubten and the God Business Yadi, then I did Nyeshe Begeda, Dumjeros Mason in this sometime was a Then Gemma de la, Dangazuki Caseta, Combico Cova said to me, Combico Cova Garcido Kumgore said, Dico Mashuache.
In this session, then, we've looked at the unshared way that hearers in solitude realizers, on the one hand, approach the meditation on the four observed objects, and the differing way the bodhisattvas approach this meditation. So we've seen the difference in approach that those who have achieved a path in their continuum take. Now for us who are yet to achieve a mental path, this is what we need to strive to do, to cultivate a mental path within our continuum. We should do so through meditating in the same way as our role models have done so. We should strive to develop a path, and the way to utilize the meditation here on the four close placements of mindfulness by ourselves in order to generate a path in our continuum is having them as our role model, setting a strong and determined motivation to meditate as well and effectively just like they do. We meditate on the four observed objects, particularly on that of the body and feelings, and we meditate on first a specific characteristic and then the four general characteristics with an emphasis on the first two, namely that of impermanent and suffering, or in the nature of suffering. And we do so as to come to the strong conclusion that our body is impermanent, it's in the nature of suffering. Our feelings too, and therefore we need to, in terms of reflecting first on the observed object of the body, this body is impermanent, this opportunity I have is going to end. It's imperative that I use what remains of this life well. And therefore, we strengthen our motivation to live a life complete accordance with the Dharma. Moreover, we're coming to see that the body is not only impermanent but in the nature of suffering. We use this to deal with our attachment to the body. Moreover, then we meditate on feelings, and we use this as the basis to see the role that craving and grasping, desire, particular attachment, but it's all the afflictions, but in particular attachment, keeping us bound to worldly pleasures, always striving for more worldly pleasure, turn away from being obsessed with overcoming small sufferings, sufferings that only are of any importance in this life, and thereby consuming our time and our energy. So this is the way I encourage you to engage in this meditation. Utilize what remains well of this life, guarding against all the afflictions, in particular attachment. Use what remains of this opportunity well. So we'll conclude here then for this week. Next week we'll come to the third major outline, that of the purpose of this meditation. Thank you very much.